but kind of wanted to just take a moment and thank everybody for being a part of Perspective Matters this year and going on this wild ride with us. You know, we really didn't plan on doing this. Perspective Matters was not something that was, in all honesty, really well thought out. It just wasn't. It was a response. And so if any of you guys out there remember, if you remember, the whole onus for the show and the reason why we started Perspective Matters was doing a conference in San Diego. Was doing innovations in recovery, and we had this really big idea, and it was how can we build a continuum of care at a conference, and then how do we get that out there? How do we market it and get people to understand the big idea? And I couldn't just put it on a flyer, you know. I couldn't just put, hey, we built a continuum of care, come check it out. Like it wasn't enough. And so I thought, why not do a Facebook Live? And why not talk to everybody about the different facets of a continuum of care and how we were building an immersive continuum of care? And so that's how the show came about. That's how we started it off. And it's definitely grown since then. I know that there was such a good response from it. We were able to really convey the idea of a continuum of care and get people excited about the conference. And then COVID hit, but we'll get to that later. But I do remember as that was going along and people were tuning in, it was like, there's really something to this medium, and this is all pre-COVID, you know, and so that's how it started. Eventually people started asking to come on the show, and we started having fun with it, and it just kind of evolved from there. You know, I do want to talk just briefly a little bit about this year, about COVID and kind of what happened with the show. So like I said, the conference idea, doing this big continuum of care, we put a lot of work and a lot of effort into it. And then COVID hit, right? And we had to change our perspective. We had to change what we did, and we switched to virtual, and so going through this whole process of, I really believe that Perspective Matters, along with virtual events and conferences, has kind of grown and evolved, and I could see a hybrid of this going forward. But it's been a blast being a part of this. And before we get into the kind of the recap, I just wanted to thank you guys again for being a part of this deal and for joining us every week. For those of you guys that are new to the show, that are just now seeing this, that Perspective Matters is on every Wednesday. It's at 1 Eastern or 10 Pacific. We broadcast it on a bunch of different social media platforms, and I like to have guests on there that just are kind of all over the place in behavioral health care, anywhere from the clinical side, from clinical directors or owners, anywhere from then medical doctors to professional athletes to sports reporters to people that are very engaged on a personal level in behavioral health care, and give a broad perspective of our field. Because in all transparency, me as a person in long-term recovery, before I got into this deal, I had no idea this world existed. I was not someone that had no means whatsoever. I had means. I had people around me that supported me through this process, and yet I did not know this whole world existed. And so one thing that we're passionate about on the show, if you can't tell already, one thing we're extremely passionate about is helping people find resources and getting the newer people in the industry in touch with mentors to give better care, because there is a whole world out here that is designed to help other people find help. So that's kind of the onus for the show. That's why we do the show. And so once again, thank you guys for joining us today. So with that, I want to kind of get into the recap. Like it's amazing. We've had so many guests on the show. We've had so many people be a part of it. And you know, if I try to show everybody on here, like we take up all of 2021 showing the just a recap of 2020. So I'm not going to do that. But what I am going to do is I want to go over some of the highlights and kind of take you through it. So walk with me just a little bit as we do this, and let's have some fun and kind of go back through 2020 with Perspective Matters. So we'll do that. And let's see if I can make this happen. So before we get into the recap, I just want to thank our sponsor, Southworth Associates and Dreamscape Marketing. Without them, they've been fantastic this year in allowing us to put on the show. Please go check them out and thank them for allowing us to be a part of this deal and bring this information to you every single Wednesday. Y'all, without the expertise and the time investment from Southworth and Dreamscape this year, Perspective Matters just doesn't happen. So thank them for sure. All right, cool. So let's get into this. So guys, my first guest on the show was Jordan Young. Now, I figured, like everybody knew in this industry, that we've all heard the tagline "Call Jordan," right? And so whenever I was thinking about let's have people on the show and actually started its own thing, first thing I did was I called Jordan. And I know that whenever people want to know what's going on in behavioral healthcare, they call Jordan. Plus, I just don't know too many people who are as plugged into the field as this guy. And in April, the issue on everybody's mind was COVID. And Jordan addressed that from a hiring perspective. And so here's a little bit of Jordan.
We have unemployment at a much higher rate than it was prior to this. We had this amazing, economy nationally, but also in our industry. And I feel like what we're going to see is that there's going to be a lot of candidates. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for treatment centers to hire top talent. Because there will be candidates who normally would not have been available that will be available in the next month or two.
And I'm not sure any of us realized at that point back in April that here we would be the first day of 2021, and we're still walking through that. We've seen tremendous changes in the field over this last year, and just like Jordan said, there are so many good people out there that are available now that maybe weren't before. And so it was an interesting way to start off the show, and I think we're still seeing that carry over today. So after kicking off with Jordan, we rolled into the Mental Health Marketing Conference. We talked with conference founder Austin Harrison and Steve Turney about the fourth year of the conference. Y'all, we're really excited about this event. I'm pulling for them to keep going in 2021 and continue that conference because the subject matter is so desperately needed. After that, we featured Ed Storty and Joe Capella. And guys, I was just privileged to be able to hang out with these two as they went over their history and in providing interventions for those struggling with addiction. Ed and Joe both talked about the importance of mentors, what they learned, as well as how to apply the tools in the intervention process. So here's a little bit from both Ed and Joe.
I had a mentor at San Pedro Peninsula Hospital. His name was Jim Fulton, and Jim was just a wonderful man. He's passed away since, and he believed in me. He believed in me, and Joe was talking about, John Southworth, a terrific man that believed in Joe. That you've got to have someone that sometimes just looks you in the eye and says, you can do this thing. You can do it. And I would hope both of us give that to others that are coming up in this field, because there's need for wonderful people to come into this field. But Jim would take me on a few of his formal interventions, and I was taken back by, if you had the product line, a good treatment program, you had passion behind you, and you felt genuine about what you were presenting to the individual, that it would make a difference in that person's life. And Jim, you know, he was a guy that basically, you know, after a few ride-alongs with him, said to me, you know, you've got it. Go in. I go, Jim, I don't think I can fly this plane. I'm telling you right now. But, well, you're going to solo it. You'll be fine. I'll tell you. But it happened for me that, as Joe talked about, something happens for the person that enjoys doing the work. And our God gives us the gift and the strength to learn, to go beyond the fears, and it happens. And I think sometimes too, we put so much intellectual strength into, you know, what ifs, could be's, and all this stuff that goes on. When in reality, if you speak from your heart and the family has a good heart, many times it conveys to the person's heart, not their mind, but it extends to their heart.
Yeah, just awesome words. Awesome words. Now let's hear from Joe.
When things go on, I have people I can reach out to and kind of bounce it off of them and get some feedback and some direction. And, you know, it's, I think that's very important, especially if you're looking at getting into the intervention aspect of it, because things change. There's never what I would call a normal intervention. They're all different, you know, and things can change in a heartbeat. And, you know, being able to work through that while you're in the middle of it with the family, but also, you know, even prior to, you know, during the family meeting or things of that nature, something comes up, having somebody that I can call and say, hey, this is what's going on. Haven't had it before. Where do I go with this? You know? So I'm grateful for those people out there that have been there for me. So.
Yeah, just all awesome. And you know, those guys, I'll tell you something, they really helped me give some focus to the show, because I saw how open and willing they were to collaborate. And I could see the need for newer people in the field to connect with mentors. And so they really helped me, give me shape to the show. Yeah, I'm really grateful for those two guys for coming on the show. And it kind of helped steer me into our next guest, which was Al Smith. And you know, I felt like there needed to be leaders, mentors, people coming on to talk about the perspective of where they came from and how they came up in this field, and also in their own professions. And so it made sense to have Al Smith come on. Al's a former NFL pro linebacker. He brought a different perspective to the conversation, having been on the front lines of the changing NFL policies regarding behavioral health and their viewpoints on supporting players through their challenges. So here's a little bit of Al talking about that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, they have, well, it's more of a physical examination, and your mental health is a part of this examination. Now, they integrated mental health initiatives as far as with your regular physical, you know, whether it be dealing your heart or your knees and your brain, depression, stress, you know, all those things are kind of tied into your mental health. And that is a component that wasn't always there. If someone needs help or needs something, there's resources there now. I mean, there's resources if need be I could tap into as well, as far as what be therapy or what have you, as a retired guy that wasn't there in the past, whatever that may be. It doesn't have to be necessarily a substance abuse, but it could be you know other issues that you're dealing with as well. So it's a wide range of mental health things that can be tapped into, which is needed, because there was a time when you're hearing a lot of players, whether it be basketball players and Kevin Love and different guys, are talking about having depression issues or mental health issues. And these are guys that been in championship games and championship series, and guys that you know and you see all the time. And you're wondering that, you know, they seem invincible, but all of a sudden when someone's talking about this mental health issue or what have you that he's going through, it's kind of a shock. But now it's not more of a shock, because so many other guys are coming out, because whether it be NFL, tennis, or any other association, these athletes aren't immune to the ills of society. And anytime something happens in society, it's the same things happening in the sports world as well. And this is a matter of how guys manage it. Some guys manage it better than others. Some guys don't deal with it, and some guys really struggle with it. And that's the thing as far as trying to have things in place to manage it, so see situations, see problems before they exist, and being able to intervene on the front end and not being reactive on the back end.
Yeah, and I think we've seen a shift in the way the mental health of players has been regarded in all of professional sports, and it was definitely a pleasure having Al on the show back in June. He's been a great friend of the program, and I enjoy working with that guy. So next up, we had Mike Walsh, and he brought us one of the bigger issues in substance use in substance use treatment. He talked about what is success. Then he brought us a solution, which always comes back to constant work on ourselves. So here's a little bit of Mike talking about that.
You know, one of the things I get asked a lot as an interventionist is, what's the success rate? And I always ask them back the same question: what's your idea of success?
Yeah.
You know, is it completing treatment? Is it, you know, getting a year? Is it, you know, some people want their son and daughter to stop getting arrested. Others want abstinence and a spiritual awakening. And there's a whole bunch of territory between those two. So first, we've got to figure out what's the goals and objectives of the family, of the client, and how can we as a treatment center or treatment professionals help them get to that goal. And if their goals are maybe short-sighted in our opinion, based on what we know, how do we get them to kind of open their eyes to more possibilities and go after more? I think we shoot our wounded too often in this industry, whether it's somebody who's relapsed during treatment or somebody who's been clean and sober a while, maybe even working in the industry and has a relapse. What do we do to kind of get them back on track, to encourage them to go a little deeper dive? That's probably the thing I've learned that's helped me the most, and that I would like to get across to whoever's listening. It's kind of like using, you know, they say you can get off that elevator whenever you want. You don't have to go to the bottom and die. On the other hand, you can take that elevator ride as high as you want. You know, I heard early on that you're never staying still. You're either getting better or worse. So, you know, I've had that experience, and you probably have too. The more work I do, the more benefit I get. The longer I continue to work on myself, the more I'll evolve.
Absolutely. I'm really grateful for the work that Mike's done and continues to do for the field. He's really picked up the torch from those that have come before, and I'll tell you something, he carries it very well, and we're glad to have him be a part of this deal. So next up, we had Dr. Leah Claire Bennett, and she gave us some great advice and for great advice for the new or inexperienced clinician. So let's hear from Leah Claire. What would you give for them?
I would say patience is number one. You know, really understanding that there are lots of complexities to the disease of addiction. And there are there's a whole person that needs help. And stopping the substances is just part of the issue. And it's just step one. And there's so much more work that has to be done. Another thing is to really think about that when a person relapses, it's not personal. It's not that you didn't do a good job. It's not that you're a failure as a provider. That is part of that process, and really taking a stance with clients or patients that, you know, what can we learn from this? I think challenging, I always want to look at myself and, you know, look at how I'm approaching things, and then helping the patient do the same thing, to where they can explore those pieces as well, so that they can learn from the experience. And then I guess, you know, finding other mentors, like what you're saying, is critical. I think addiction is cunning, baffling, and powerful. And that's a very, very true statement. And to know that if you're going to help individuals with addiction, you can't think that you're smart enough on your own as an early clinician that you're going to be able to know how to handle all those situations. You need help. And so find people who have been doing it a long time and use them as resources. I would say would be the top 3 things that I would recommend.
Right on. Wise words, and I'll tell you something. It's been a real basis for the show, and was glad to have Leah Claire on. Next up, we had Joanna Conti, and Joanna gave us a glimpse of what could be possible with accurate outcomes. So here's Joanna.
You know, one of the goals that I have for a long-term goal is, you know, if we can get a lot of, you know, a broad spectrum of addiction treatment centers to actually be doing, you know, tracking their outcomes, whether they're doing, you know, medication-assisted treatment, whether they're doing abstinence-based treatment, you know, if we can get that on a you know, and standardize that and compare the results, I think that there's an opportunity, you know, a couple of years from now to have data on a large enough base of patients that we could actually start to predict what type of treatment would be most effective for a particular patient based on maybe their demographic profile or their drug and alcohol use history or whatever. But, you know, imagine when, and people will just say, oh, sure, you know, when I say that, but imagine being able to predict to, you know, a mom who's bringing in her, you know, a 22-year-old son and say, you know, based on the fact that, you know, he's been using opiates for, you know, 3.5 years, abusing opiates for that long, you know, we think he will be more likely to be alive and thriving a year from now if he goes on Suboxone today. Or, you know, maybe we think he'll be more likely to be doing well, you know, with some other type of treatment. But to have hard data to be able to base that decision on, I mean, that'll be just, you know, an incredible game changer.
Yeah, wouldn't that be? I mean, seriously, wouldn't that be a real game changer, to use Joanna's own words? And I think it's something that we strive for in this field. So speaking of games, Dan Gimp and I had a little bet for the Mental Health Marketing Conference, and we brought it on the show. So I want to bring that up real quick and check that out, because we had a lot of fun with this, and I think it was definitely a highlight of the Mental Health Marketing Conference that we brought to it. So here's a little Dan.
So I was thinking over the weekend while I was rewatching the entire Hobbit series, right? You're going to be up in the corner like one of those little Hobbit people, and you might make a few good points. You might win a couple rounds, but I'm going to be like big on the screen, like I see myself right now, like a wizard with a big hat full of marketing knowledge. I'm going to be shooting lightning bolts out the screen at everybody. So it just doesn't compare. You know what I mean?
Look, we had a lot of fun with that little contest, and
so
I will tell you that through kind of a fluke in the internet that week, it had to have been a fluke. Dan Gimp won our little contest. He won by 9 viewers, and so I can tell you this: and after that, my followers assured me they were doing many things, and they were doing important things that kept them from viewing the session that day, and that's how Dan won. But they have assured me that we're going to do this rematch in 2021, and yeah, it's going to work out then. But God, you know, Dan and I had a good time, and I just can't thank Dan and his team at Dreamscape Marketing for all the work that they've done this year, not only for Perspective Matters, but also for our conference, Perspectives: A Time for Change. These guys really showed up big, and so you know, Dan, I'll let you have that one. You can have that win, but I'm coming for you in 2021. Also, I do want to mention that Kelly Farrell was part of the Mental Health Marketing Conference that week, and we broadcast her session on the show. And Kelly's been a great friend of the program, and she and Design Room are doing great work up there. So we're glad to have her be a part of that. And then next up, we had Ryan Miller from TPAS, and he detailed the efficacy of alumni programming and explained the role it plays in substance use treatment. But like, have you seen that in alumni services? Are you seeing more focus being put on alumni services because of that renewed interest in outcomes?
Yeah, I definitely think that may be a part of it. You know, certainly, you know, carriers and providers and insurance companies are wanting to see kind of, you know, the efficacy of what we do and kind of to see long-term what happens to people post-treatment. And, you know, I know a lot of alumni programs, ours included, you know, we do collect some outcome surveys that hopefully turn around and actually inform, you know, clinical treatment, right? If we're seeing some trends, both positive and negative, they can turn around and actually inform clinical treatment. But, you know, definitely, you know, we want to see people stay clean and sober, but there's so many markers of success: employability, increased family relationships. We're not using the ER as primary care anymore. It's like, you know, there's a lot of markers for success, and certainly alumni programming can help pave the path to not only receiving that information, but really kind of seeing the progression of somebody's journey, like you said, beyond the 30-day or 60-day or even 90-day treatment stay.
Yeah, good stuff. And then after Ryan, we had one of my conference favorites. So Dr. Lee Stanger came on, and she talked about the dangers of phone usage for people still in active addiction. And so here's Louise.
I think the hardest thing sometimes for parents is not just the car, it's this. It's the phone. Because the phone is a direct dial. I go, how many times has your adult son, your adult daughter, your child called you? Oh, they don't call me unless they need something. Oh, do you know that that's a direct dial to a drug dealer? And it's that fear that I said, trust me, they know how to find you. They will find you when they need you. And so it's even letting go and cutting off the telephone that becomes so counterintuitive, because it's seen as a GPS, as a lifeline, when in essence, they're only using it with the people that have problems.
Yeah, I love Louise's insight and the heart she has for working with families. She's definitely one of my favorite interviews and one of my favorite people at conferences. I know that, gosh, every time I see her and John, or Mr. Wattis, as she calls him out, it's just, she always welcomes me with a hug, and I love Louise, and glad that she could be a part of this in 2020, and definitely looking forward to seeing her in 2021. So next up on the show, we had Tracy Duich, who actually at the time had just opened up Heal Behavioral Health in Florida. So Tracy dropped a little nugget of wisdom around good marketing practices at events and conferences. So here's Tracy.
Before you walk in the door of any meeting or any gathering, let's say, I always have a goal in mind of, you know, walking away with 3 set appointments from that gathering, no matter what it is. If it's a conference, it's on any given day of the conference, a multi-day conference, multi-day conference during the week. I would make sure I made appointments each day. And there are certain people that are in from out of town that I've wanted to get close to that I haven't had the opportunity to do so. So I like to have a little, you know, I'm ahead of the game with making those appointments so that I can get a face-to-face, because it's kind of tough to do. You know, conferences can be very fast moving. They can be very intimidating for a lot of people. I was taught that a conference is like when you walk into a conference hall, be prepared to do 25 first dates in 10 minutes.
Isn't that the truth? I appreciate that as a conference guy, and there were so many times where I'd see people come in for their first event, and I'm sure you guys can remember your first conference and just like looking around and being overwhelmed. Like I remember the first time I went to the Breakers and was just like, wow, this is amazing, you know. And it can just get away and overwhelm, and so those are definitely some wise words. Another thing I'll throw in there that I want to add to what Tracy said is that make sure that if you are going to your first conference, or you're new at doing conferences and events, when we get back to them, that you make sure that you don't just spend all your time in the hotel where the conference is. Like make sure that you schedule some time away to go actually enjoy being there and being a part of it. It'll make you better in your work. You'll come back and be able to go through the exhibit hall and go do your job so much better. So make sure that you take time away. It's something I had to learn. I would go to these tremendous locations. I remember one year going to the Breakers and not going to the beach. The Breakers is on the beach. I mean, come on. Like I should be able to make it out there at least once, and I didn't. And so I had to make a choice to be real intentional about that. And it's definitely made me better in my work. All right, so moving on. We got into August, and our guest was Dr. Andrew Krieger. He came on and highlighted some key points regarding issues in the field of substance use treatment. I'm going to bring in Dr. Andrew Krieger. I love spending time with him. So here's a little clip from him.
The first problem, if you really look at the condition, right? Okay. I liked CASA's definition when they put out their, there's these big databases, all this research and all these professionals, they put out this big kind of statement on addiction medicine treatment. And, several years ago, and they basically say complex brain disease with significant behavioral characteristics. And then they go on to describe how, isn't it weird, and again, paraphrasing, that we have a brain disease and not a lot of medical doctors involved in the treating of this disease, right? Which is odd. And coming from a medical model, I certainly think that's odd, right? And when you start looking, look at how many doctors are boarded in addiction medicine. It's only a couple thousand. It's a very small number, compared to, say, family medicine or, any other of the specialties. So that's the first kind of big gap, this lack of professionalism. The second is, and I think this is really a private sector issue, all the reimbursement from an insurance-based model is really for the acute phase of treatment. Now what I mean is, when does somebody present for treatment? They're usually in a crisis, right? They might be physically unstable, they need detox, it might be mentally, emotionally unstable, they might be socially unstable, financially, you name it, but something is going on there in a crisis, right? So we put them into treatment, we detox them if it's appropriate, no problem reimbursement there. We put them in an inpatient or residential level of care in that continuum. Used to be 3 months, way back when. Now, a couple weeks if you have pretty good insurance, right? Yep. Then we move you to IOP, still acute phase, intensive outpatient. I have nothing against acute treatment or the continuum. I'm a believer in it. But here becomes the gap, right? So let's just loosely say 1 month to 45 days, typically, if you're motivated and have decent insurance, you're in a treatment continuum. Then what happens? Well, I'll tell you what happens. What happens is more or less insurance will no longer pay for that. Okay. So you wind up with free aftercare, which some programs really pride themselves on that, or they have, X patients, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's kind of making do with what you have, or you'll have one licensed person over a giant aftercare program or group, or, that kind of thing. But the reason that the treatment programs don't typically focus a lot of effort there is because there's no reimbursement for it, okay? So we're treating a chronic condition acutely. And I think the game really is won or lost on the chronic condition management and taking that George Valiant, just ripping it right out of the last article I saw on the subject. He compares it to putting addiction in remission, much like you would put diabetes in remission. That chronic condition management is really the game, right? And I certainly believe that wholeheartedly for a brain disease type of profile, okay?
Yeah, I really enjoy spending time with Dr. Krieger, and every time I sit and talk with him and have a conversation, I feel like I learned something new, and he really does hammer home the point that oftentimes through a number of external circumstances, we end up treating a chronic condition acutely when it comes to substance use treatment. And he really hammered that home for us. So it was definitely, it was a privilege to hang out with him, and always look forward to spending time with Drew. So next on the show, we had Ben Seymour. He's the president of Southworth Associates, who I work for, and who was gracious enough to help produce the show and be a part of the show. And when I had Ben on, I had him talk about the gold standard in substance use treatment outcomes. And so here's Ben talking about that in our studio at Southworth.
What is that gold standard? And so for us, ultimately working with physicians and healthcare providers, licensed individuals, our dental program currently is over 72% success rate, defined as 5 years, no use of any mind-altering substance, engaged in 12-step based recovery, practicing their career, no relapses. verified with forensic accountability through drug testing, hair testing, PET testing, all these different forms that we change up, and it's truly randomized, right? So
we're talking real remission, right?
real
Like, yeah.
disease remission, chronic disease in remission, and progressive recovery, right? I realize that's not necessarily the goal with every patient that comes into treatment. I realize there are different populations with different agendas. So, but really, when we're looking at helping people get sober or clean or whatever their drug of choice is, that's the gold standard. When we look at pilots, we look at those kind of populations. So really, it's working backwards from there.
Yeah, and you know, the thing that I hear from Ben often is how is it that we have a roadmap for what works, and we're still stuck in the starting blocks. We're still trying to once again treat that chronic condition acutely. It's just something to think about. I'm grateful for Ben coming on and talking about that, and for Southworth for the monitoring program that they put out there, and other programs as well. That really is the missing link and the key to this deal. So I was definitely glad to have Ben on talking about that. Next up, Zvi Eber came on and gave us more food for thought. And he brought to light one of the main issues in this, and one of the reasons why we have such a difficult time with what works, because we're talking about reimbursements. He also outlined a little bit of the solution and what they're doing there, which is extremely innovative. So I'll let Zvi talk about it.
We've been, as an industry, taking advantage of every level of care. I've never met someone that, you know, got detox off for 10 days and kept the guy for 6, you know, and what ended up happening is that when you take advantage of a system, the system is going to push back, and the system has pushed back, right? And we see it across the country, no matter where you are. And, you know, we're reaping the downfalls of other people's mistakes. Whether we created those mistakes or not, it's still our problem. It's our brothers, it's our sisters that work next door. We refer to, we know that they're doing certain things, but yet turning a blind eye because we have our business to take care of. We're a community, you know. When in the hospital industry, when one hospital is trying to get something passed, another hospital usually jumps on board because that's their responsibility, because they're going to need the next thing. And our decapitated rate, just to make it easier for people to understand, is we're responsible for a patient's care for 60 days. What that means is it doesn't matter if they need 30 days of detox or they need 3 days of detox. We're paid the exact same rate. If they relapse, we need to take them back. If they need inpatient, we need to pay for it. We essentially become the EAP of any patient that decides to check in with us.
And so Zvi is definitely part of this new generation of behavioral health innovators, and is really changing the way that we do business and help others. I'm excited about the work they're doing up there in Manhattan, about how they're really working with the payers, the carriers, to come up with a new model of reimbursement that is patient-centered. So really excited about the work those guys are doing up there. And speaking of the work those guys are doing up there, Jeff Holbrook was our next guest. And he does work with Zvi up there, and he's got this interesting title of Chief Happiness Officer. And so I'll let him talk about that and what has him kind of fired up in this field.
And the title Chief Happiness Officer is to kind of try to bring a new approach inside the management model, because I don't think old management models work. You know, especially not in the field that we have, and especially if you're working with and a lot of people in our industry are in recovery, and a lot of them haven't been sober all that many years. And so to try to lighten that thing up and to also help them understand that they're not in it alone, you know. So I'm the ear they can come talk to, you know, for advice, support. None of it is necessarily reported up the chain, you know, that kind of thing. So Zvi's, people like Zvi and some of these other younger guys I'm starting to see that are still really energetic about their own spiritual growth, their own professional growth, you know, that want to do it and do it right. That's what has me excited right now, because for a long time I didn't see that. You know, I just saw these huge companies building these models, and they would go to conferences and talk about how many new beds they added to the system. And they didn't even say, this is how many more people were actually helping. It was about how many new beds they had in, you know, into their system. So this part's kind of exciting to me, to be able to mentor some of the new up and coming people that are managing the program. So,
Yep, it's funny. There's kind of the running joke around, and for all those people who wondered what Jeff actually did for all these years, I think we finally found out. I think Chief Happiness Officer fits him perfectly, and I love Jeff in that role, and the work that he's doing up there. I think it's fantastic. So next we had Walter Boone from Balch Bingham. He opened up September with us and shared a little bit about why he battles in the courtrooms, and what he would personally like to see at the end of the day. So here's Walter.
Well, you know, obviously for our particular clients, we want them to be made whole, because they have incurred and taken it on the chin, quite frankly. The emergency rooms in this country are the places where the rubber met the road with the opioid epidemic. That's where people go when they OD'd and whatnot, and a lot of those costs were not reimbursed and were just sucked up by the healthcare community. So we would like for folks to be made whole that have been damaged. And from a personal level as well, I would like, and we would like, you know, for whatever funds are available to actually go to be solving the problem.
Right.
Let's get people treatment. That's what we need, you know, and get people, let's stop the ongoing epidemic, and let's get people who have it treatment.
Yeah, I will tell you this. I was also very impressed with how Walter and the team at Balch and Bingham jumped on things as the COVID-19 pandemic really set in or came in. You know, as this was all coming about, everything was new, right? Everybody was trying to figure out what we needed to do, how we could continue to treat patients. And the team there, Walter and the team, just rushed out there to share this information for providers. I remember Walter coming to me and asking me, hey, we have this information. We want to get it out to people so we can continue serving. How can we do that? And so we tried to help blast it out and get it out to as many people as possible. And so I just really want to commend Walter and the team for doing that. Thank you guys so much. Your team was valuable to us as we went through this, and the updates throughout the year to keep us aware of the legal ramifications we were facing. It was invaluable. I've had a number of people reach out to me over the course of the pandemic and thank me for you guys. So I just want to return the favor and appreciate Walter and the team for coming on and doing that, and continuing to keep us updated. I'm sure I'll look for you here in January to see what's new and what's coming down the pike. So moving forward, we had Esther Nicholson, and I'll tell you something, every time Esther takes the stage, you know you're going to be in for a powerful performance, and she didn't disappoint as a guest on the show. And her words were moving, and they inspired me as she explained what drives her both personally and professionally. So here's Esther Nicholson.
I believe that in the beginning of my recovery, had someone told me, you were not created out of disease. You may have been born into dysfunction, but you were created out of greatness. You were created out of the very stuff of the universe. Like, what? Like, what does that even mean? It's like to know that no matter what you've done, no matter how many mistakes you've made, no matter what, that you may have been born into that belief system. You may have been born into a distorted perception and distorted perspectives, but that the very core of you is beautiful and whole and perfect and complete, and that your recovery is about getting back to that.
Yeah, I love the passion Esther brings to the field, and look forward to the expansion of Soul Recovery next year. It was a pleasure having her on the show. She fires me up every time I talk to her. So after Esther, we had Ryan Porter, the Behavioral Health and Quality Assurance Manager for the Idaho Supreme Court. And he came on the show to talk about some of the advantages and the differences between the public and private sector in behavioral health care. So here's Ryan.
Oftentimes there's a little bit more, there's a little bit more monetary value in the system to access things that maybe sometimes the public sector can't. I'd love to see the bridge in the public sector be able to offer the full continuum and offer it all the time, right? So state budgets, they run out, they change, they move in a different direction, or they have a new shiny toy, and that's where the limited funding goes. I think the private sector is able to maneuver that world a little bit better, where the public sector struggles a little bit. However, I think there's some benefits to the public sector as well, right? The people that work in the public sector and those clinicians that do that work, they're not necessarily driven or motivated by a billable hour or fee for service. If they're on salary with a state entity, they can just concentrate on doing the best work that they can. And I love that part of the public sector, where they're really just there to meet people where they're at.
Yeah, Ryan is really doing great work in the state of Idaho and is driving patient-centered care for those struggling with behavioral health issues while they're engaged in our state's legal system. It's a much valued service, and it's great to see somebody that is so mission-driven and patient-centered be at the center of the public sector in the state of Idaho. They're doing great work, and want to champion Ryan's work there with the Idaho Supreme Court. So our next guest was instrumental to me personally whenever I moved to Nashville and started working at Foundations. I moved there from Austin, and Steve really was welcoming me to Nashville, and he's a vital part of the program at Cumberland Heights. During by day, he's led many an individual to personal recovery and in various recovery fellowships across the country. I was extremely happy to have Mr. Steve Lee on the show to wrap up September.
At the end of the day, whether it is in business development, whether it is in the behavioral health care space, period, or any endeavor that we're doing in life, the most important thing I can do is bring who I am to that. And that's one of the things, when I made this shift over to behavioral health care in 2014, after doing a job that had served me well for a long time and enjoyed it for a long time, but I had lost the enjoyment of the work I was doing. It was certainly a means to an end financially, and that's not unimportant to any of us. The financial practicalities of life are there. But I stopped and I said, what I'm going to do when I go forward is I'm going to take exactly who I am to whatever I'm doing, and that's going to work or not work. And that doesn't mean other people have to change to make it fit. It means that I'm going to go in and authentically be who I am, because I absolutely believe that that's my best opportunity to be useful and helpful and to have real connection with people.
Yeah, it was an honor to work with Steve. And I'll tell you something, he does bring his authentic self to work, and is definitely a role model for those of us that are in this deal. And I appreciate every time we get to hang out and spend time together, and love Steve and the team at Cumberland Heights. They do amazing work there. So after Steve, we took a break from the show for a couple of weeks to put on Perspectives, A Time for Change, their virtual conference. So with this challenge, with this with the pandemic and shutting down events, I remember going, like, sitting in a place like, what are we going to do now? And to be able to make this transition, to be able to produce this event virtually and bring the information, that was just a tremendous undertaking. I can't thank the team at Southworth and Dreamscape and all of our partners, all of our sponsors, the Guest House and Maple Mountain and so many, in Cumberland Heights, there's so many others. Ken Seeley, all the guys that the teams that came together to make that event possible. It is still available for you guys. It's free. Go check out the conference and look at all of the work and effort that was put in to try to kind of bridge this gap during this crazy time that we're in. I'm just really extremely proud of the work that we all did to bring that conference. And that being said, I can't wait to get back to in-person events. I just can't wait to see you guys and to get to a point where we can, walk up and give each other a big hug or handshake and get back to being relational again. Just really looking forward to that. So when we wrapped up the conference, Jason Turner came on. He talked about kinetic psychology and how he began collaborating to bring this new work to patients. So here's Jason.
And started down this path, I got a hold of some science, and I got a hold of a book, and I got a hold of another book, and then I got a hold of some people who knew some stuff way more than I did. And as I began to see what was happening in the response of the clients, I realized, wait a minute, there's a lot more going on here than human connection. It's a main staple of the whole process, but there's executive function, there's problem solving. And when you peel back the layers, you start to learn, everyone says, oh, exercise, endorphins, feel good chemicals. There's that process, but there's a real connection to neuroplasticity and rewiring the brain that traces back to our evolution, is how we came into this current state, right, of this version of our human species, right? So the idea that we grew on the move, we changed on the move, the brain got bigger, the wiring process is affected, brain-derived nootropic factor gets produced, oxytocin gets, all of this stuff is happening. And I didn't know that when I started. What I knew was you supporting me through something really challenging, obviously, is going to connect me to you, and it's going to help me to feel good.
Yeah, and Jason and so many others have shown what can happen when you marry the science up with a bit of our own experience, all in the vein of helping others. And I'll tell you, speaking of science, our next guest, Megan Reinhardt and Nikki Gilbertson from Ray, came on and they talked about the role of wearable technology in the behavioral healthcare space. Here, I'm going to let them talk about it. How important, especially right now, whenever we're all living in such a unique environment with COVID and not being able to get to the normal services, right?
It's huge. Yeah. So we're working in substance use disorder, but I wear my device on a daily basis, and being mindful of my stress and knowing when I need to get up and walk and take time for myself is huge. Connection, to utilizing technology to connect people, not to take away from that real life connection and that real life clinical and professional support, but as an ancillary add-on to give quantitative data back to the provider, and more importantly, which I feel it's really valuable to me, our algorithm is so sensitive that a lot of the times, what you're feeling in your mind and what you're feeling in your body happens before you can even process it. So having that alert before you escalate so that you can de-escalate and go back to your coping mechanisms, tools, take a breather, is incredibly valuable.
And let's hear from Nikki.
Ultimately, the feedback from the patients that when I'm reading the exit interviews is overwhelmingly positive, and that minute where the craving's happening or the stress is happening, just the vibration, the popping up on the app, that pause of a, you know, if it's 5 seconds just to reroute the brain and just really stop has been really helpful to them. So that's what we're trying to do is, you know, empower the patient. They're the quarterback in this whole process. And if we can help them, everything's going to be better.
Yeah, I'm encouraged by the work being done in the area of wearables in our field, and I hope that we'll be able to combine this technology with proven monitoring practices, so we can give our patients the best chance to attain long-term recovery from this deal. The marriage between those two things, with compliance monitoring and wearable devices, I think is a really sign of the future, and hope we can get there sooner rather than later. So our next guest was Dan Caldwell. And he came on and talked about the internal shift from a one-size-fits-all model to this individualized care, which I think is so important.
I really do believe that, as in particular, those of us that in recovery that's experienced that change are so passionate about what works. Right? Because this worked for me, it must work for you, right? Well, slow down, right? So I've had to make that shift from, oh no, you got to go to 7 meetings a week and do this and do that. AA is it, right? That's where you got to go to. Hey, I'd rather you go to 1 meeting a week and be present and be engaged and have that quality interaction than I would you go checking boxes, right? And I've had to separate from, I don't have to tell you what to do, you have to tell you what to do. Right? What are you willing to do? And I really try, I've taken a role to truly individualize my care. If you don't do, look, I tell my people 1 of 2 things will happen. You'll do it or you won't. I'm going to walk with you every step of the way, either way, right? But you will do it or you won't. So it's about finding a puzzle. We're all like puzzles, right? It's about finding the right pieces that fit your puzzle. If it's not AA, that's okay. Let's go to SMART. Well, if it's not SMART, I'm going to go to church. Well, that's fine too, but just do it. Right, take some actions.
Yeah, you can appreciate Dan's passion for helping, and his call to action it's infectious. And now I will say this: that Dan and my next guest had a lot in common. They were both realizing the dreams of starting their own companies, going from working for others and being in a small practice into realizing their dream of starting their own deal. And so my next guest was Annette Kachumian with RE Recovery. She was also a clinician that turned her education, her experience, and drive into the realization of opening her own business. So here's Annette. Like what prompted you to say, instead of like going and starting like another business venture, like this is what I'm going to get into?
Yeah, well, it just didn't make sense to me to do anything outside of what my realm of knowledge is. It's something that I know well, and it's something that is very personal and passionate for me. So it didn't make sense for me to go open a clothing store, which I have no business about, and I also saw such a strong need for it. I saw so many other people running these kinds of facilities where they had no knowledge of it, they had no understanding of it, they had no ethics behind it. So, we don't go to our hairdresser and ask them to fix our car, right? So why would we go to somebody who doesn't have any kind of a clinical understanding and background and entrust them with our health, with our well-being of us or our loved ones? So I was quite marveled to see that kind of rigor wasn't expected from this industry so much. And I thought, well, I think if everybody seems to find that this is plausible to do, I think that we can do it right. We can do it ethically. We can do it in a clinically sound way. And so I think if you surround yourself with wonderful support and hard work and a little bit of faith in there, it's very possible to do. So that's kind of how I merged the two together.
Yeah, and that's definitely part of those up and comers I was talking about earlier in the show, and yeah, excited about what she's doing out there with RE. Another newer face in the field is Angelia Ariano. Angelia started RevWorks Billing, and and she's known for her expertise in utilization review, and also known for her tenacity in working with clients to get authorization days from insurance carriers. Now, we get to see a little bit of that experience here in this clip as she talks about renegotiating in-network rates that they could appeal to. But if they are in network and they want to increase their contracted rate, what are some good points to make with the carrier once they're already in network with them to increase that?
Yeah, that one's difficult, especially right now. I can tell you here in California, in like the private practice arena, we at my practice have requested rate negotiations for all of the commercial insurance companies that we're in network with, and I think 2 agreed to increase the rates, TRICARE and Cigna, lo and behold. But most of them are not doing any type of rate negotiation. So for those individual carriers that are not, they're not considering rate negotiations or rate increases for any of their providers, they're currently getting requests about 2 to 4 times a month from us. So it's let's pester and let them know that we're not going anywhere. And then you might even have to consider other things like raising your current rates, your cash rates, and going through that process. But it's definitely something that you as a provider have to fight for when they're saying, no, we're not doing it right now. And a lot of them are not negotiating rates for current contracted facilities, but for new contracted facilities, they're getting a little bit higher rates than the facilities that are already contracted, if that makes sense.
So moving from a couple of the newer faces to someone that's been doing this for a bit, my next guest is a coworker of Foundations. When I was there, she really took the reins of the conferences when they needed someone to bridge the gap. And so Renee Baribeau always brings a fun mix of spirituality, experience, business sense, and I'd say just plain fun whenever she works with anybody. And this is on full display whenever she talked about how she got into the business development side of our industry. So here's Renee.
I was writing a book, Winds of Spirit, which is now the Hay House, award-winning, best-selling book in shamanism. And what happened was, all of a sudden I realized it was going to cost a lot of money to edit it, to market it, to do all of the things. It's not like you get a publisher and you're off to the races. And I saw this job. I thought, well, let me, get some income. And there was this job listed for a marketer who was an event planner who was a healer. I'm thinking, like, who puts those 3 things in the same line? And it turns out Krista Gilbert did when she was the CEO of Michael's House. And I went for the interview and I told her about my WIN book, and she called me back for a second interview. And I had no idea. I thought I was just going to go there for like a year. Some people thought I'd make it about 3 weeks. And when I got started, I was like, because I'd been self-employed for so long. And here I am 8 years later, still working in the field of addiction. And it was definitely spirit driven.
Yeah. Renee and I, we've had a lot of fun over the last couple of years, and I think we're going to continue that. We're doing some work in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm really excited about getting to work with Renee again. We just have a great time whenever we get together. So our last guest of the year was Dr. Leslie Tate Gould from Lido Wellness Center. And I can't thank her enough for being a part of it in Christmas week. Like, my goodness, we're still all traveling around for the holidays and or at least with family and friends and that kind of stuff, and or doing these Zoom meetings. And she took the time out of her schedule to come talk about kind of the passion she has for helping others, but also the deal with trauma, right? And she talked about the common overuse of the word trauma and how we should approach it with our patients. So here's let's take Gould.
I also like working from Levine. As you can see, I'm clearly a fan, right? As an SCP, I like working from his conceptualization that trauma is also not contingent upon the event itself. And that's really important because it allows us to also hold some hopefulness and humanity that even if somebody has gone through something really tragic or really maybe on a global level catastrophic, like what comes to mind is like the 9/11 attacks. Some individuals absolutely experienced unresolved fight, flight, or freeze response. Absolutely, they were in great danger. However, that doesn't mean that everyone who went through that process is traumatized, right? So that's a really key distinction, because if not, then we could be blanketly prescribing something to someone where they may not actually, relate to that, or they may not connect with that type of language. So I'm also very careful to, if I'm working with someone,
Yeah, I tell you, it was a great way to finish out the year. And I think that Dr. Tate Gould always, like the way that her approach and how open she is, and how she talks about not overusing the word trauma, like recognizing it but not overusing it, I think is really needed. And what a better way to finish off the year than by talking about dealing with trauma, right? What a crazy year. I just want to I just want to take a moment and thank everybody for walking with us through this year. It really was an unprecedented time. I just think, like, right now we all kind of have a decision to make with what we've gone through. I can remember, I'm actually here, I'm joining you guys today from my sister's house in Austin, Texas. And what's significant about that is that this is the same location where we had the decision to make back in the early part of this year, in talking about what are we going to do with the Innovations in Recovery conference. And the pandemic had hit, or was coming down. We had to cancel the event. And I can remember sitting here in this house and it crushed me, because we spent so much time and so much effort and so much work in putting this Continuum of Care conference on, only to cancel it. And it crushed me personally. And I can remember sitting here in this house, and there was something in this brief moment that changed. And I said, okay, we have this deal, we've had this event. The event that I'd pictured in my head and worked so hard is not going to happen. But what are we going to do now? What are we going to do with this period of time that we've been given? Are we going to let it beat us? Are we going to let it, beat us down and just cancel and sit and sulk? Or are we going to take the cards that were dealt and change the game and go play a new hand? And that's what we did. We took the cards that we were dealt and we went and played them. And I think we've all seen that over this year. So many of our guests on the show, so many of the programs that we work with out there have taken this tough hand of 2020 and really played it to the best of our ability, and innovated and changed the way that we do business, the way that we help others, the way that we deliver care. And it's just been amazing to see. So I want to commend everybody. I want to thank everybody for the work that they do out there in behavioral health care to help their patients. My hope is that we, let this point in time, this amazing circumstance that we've all been put in, my hope is that we let it drive us to treat others, to do better. I hope that it does. It drives us, and so that we can treat others with love and compassion. That it drives us to reach out to those that are in need, or just need a hug, right? I hope that we can do better by ourselves. That maybe we could put the phone down at some point, go outside, go have an adventure, right? You guys know that I'm a big fan of going out in the mountains. I want you to go out and do that in 2021. I want you to go out, go spend time, find your peace, find you again, reintroduce yourself to you, find peace, and then bring that back for all those that are lost out there. Be a guide to those out there, and help them change their perspective. That's my hope. I do want to take this moment. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the show. It's been my pleasure. It's been a blast. I look forward to a great 2021. You know, we have a great lineup of guests coming on the show, and next week is going to kick off 2021 with Jeff Gould. He's an interventionist and a hockey enthusiast from Dallas, Texas, and I'm excited to have Jeff on the show and talk with him. Once again, Happy New Year. Welcome to 2021. If you or you know somebody that would like to be a guest on the show, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to talk to you guys and continue to bring everybody together. And remember, no matter what, it's just a matter of perspective. Love each other, hold the space for each other, and Happy New Year. And we'll talk to you guys soon.